r/askreddit. What are some declassified government documents that are surprisingly terrifying? Project Sunshine, where the US government bought remains of dead infants to test for radiation. When they took limbs from them, the parents were never told. One mother wasn't allowed to dress her daughter for her funeral because doctors had removed her legs and didn't want her to find out. Is anyone else ridiculously disturbed that they named that Project Sunshine? What the fuck? Yes, it's all pretty fucked, and the things are some babies and young children were taken from other countries to be shipped in the US. Edit. A word. An apostrophe. I'm sorry Reddit, I failed you. Jeffrey Dahmer's full confession. A couple of 100 pages of pure madness. Necrophilia. Dismemberment. Skinning. Lobotomy. Body part preservation. Cannibalism. Dahmer became pretty close to his interrogating detectives, Dennis Murphy and Patrick Kennedy, and provided a lot of detail to them. A lot of it in a pretty candid, offhand manner. I will never understand how the two main movies on Dahmer barely even touch the fact that he was a cannibal necrophiliac butcher. Same thing with the recent Ted Bundy movie with Efron. Like really? Dude went back to his body dump sites weeks later, dug up his victims, and had sex with their corpses, and you're not going to mention that? Edit. I'm aware of the purpose of the Bundy movie. Nothing that anyone is saying is negating the fact that they could have alluded to what he did at the end of the film when it's revealed that he was in fact guilty. Instead, we end up thinking that he's just a serial killer rapist rather than getting the full picture that he was far more disturbed than that. He truly was a monster, as the title states, and a big part of what separates him from other serial killers is that element of his MO. Confessions of serial killers, especially in prison, are notoriously untrustworthy. They take identity from boasting about their crimes even though it may not seem like boasting. That being said, some of Dahmer's confessions are right on the money. All I'm saying is take it with some grains of salt. They also always leave out that he was racist as well. Which is why almost all his victims were gay black dudes. He also worked at a chocolate factory. After the My Lai massacre, killing of around 400-500 innocent civilians in Vietnam after an army troop killed an entire village, the US government established a group to investigate other war crimes like this occurring in Vietnam, the Vietnam War Crimes Working Group. They found 28 massacres of equal or greater magnitude than My Lai that the public was unaware of, so literally thousands of innocent people killed by US soldiers. The information has since been reclassified, but there were several journal articles on it when it was first released. I took a military ethics class hosted by a prof who spent many years in Vietnam as a Marine captain. He personally experienced a colonel who operated with a doctrine called count the meat. Basically, the success of an operation was dependent upon how many bodies it made. The presumption was that they were all enemies. William Calley, responsible for My Lai, had a sentence of only 3 years for murdering over 20 people. Jimmy Carter even led a campaign to pardon Calley. The destruction was mutual. We went to Vietnam without any desire to capture territory or impose American will on other people. I don't feel that we ought to apologize or castigate ourselves or to assume the status of culpability. One US bomber accidentally dropped a nuclear bomb a short distance from a major US city, can't remember which, but luckily it didn't detonate. Off the coast of Georgia. They still haven't found it. There are over 50 mishaps with nuclear weapons by the US Air Force in the 1950s alone. CIA invested millions in trying to make cat spies. $20 million to be precise. Know why it didn't work? Test number 1. Their very first spigot ever ran into the street and was hit by a car. They decided to not continue. In East Germany, a committed freedom fighter and her husband had dealt with having her home raided while she was away, being arrested on the way to protests and all sorts of state-sponsored harassment. After the wall fell, she was able to read the documents the Stasi had kept on her and found out her own husband was an undercover agent and had written many reports on her activities with a bloodless banality. Suspiciously, she always has a headache when I propose having sex. Possible capitalist plot? British Metropolitan Police Services have done exactly the same on ecological protesters from organizations like Greenpeace. There was literally a case a few years back, like 5 years ago, an undercover cop I believe married, and even had kids with a protester he was investigating the whole way through. Oh, that's a good one. Looking that up. Operation Northwoods, a plan for a false flag operation that came from the Joint Chiefs of Staff and Department of Defense in 1962 and given to JFK, who turned it down. The plan called for the CIA to commit terrorist actions against US civilians across the United States and frame Cuba, allowing us the right to invade and depose Castro and the communist government there. It was declassified and can be found online at the JFK library. Terrifying that no one knows or seems to care that this was suggested by our government to the president. My high school English teacher mandated that I read this. I didn't understand it at the time, but he was responding to my question I posed him. As an airborne vet, why do you seem so jaded in regards to US history and politics? Still one of my favorite teachers to this day, he and I were able to go into a lot other Ost things the US has done. So it's completely feasible that 9/11 was a false flag operation. Not declassified documents, but the discovery of the Tuskegee syphilis study on unwitting black American males was pretty fucking horrific. MK Ultra. Partially illegal, forced mind control experiments utilizing psychoactive drugs, conducted by the CIA in 1950s-60s. Possibly created the Unabomber. Two things come to mind. I think they're called the Pentagon Papers. They detail how America went into Vietnam with no intention of winning, rather to control China in that part of the world. Not creepy, but potentially creepy is the JFK assassination papers that get released in October. I'm looking forward to that day. Edit. Spelling. Holy shit. I didn't know they were releasing his documents. I can't wait. I thought the bulk of those were released 2 years ago, and no one cared. When the Space Shuttle Challenger was destroyed, it was reported that all 7 astronauts were killed instantly. It was revealed decades later that some, if not all of the astronauts survived the initial explosion, as the cockpit cabin had enough protection to not be breached. For 2 minutes and 45 seconds, they were awake and aware, as they plummeted toward the Atlantic Ocean. Understandably, NASA knew that the news of their terrifying death would have crippled the space program even more than it already was. We looked at this in flight school and pretty much, there's evidence to support that the crew was still running their procedures even after it was obvious shit hit the fan. They didn't die accepting their fate, they died astronauts. That's something to be admired, Imo. So what was the actual cause of death? Pardon my stupid question. Surprised no one has mentioned the Panama Papers. They've been out for a while, but there's been little coverage of them. TLDR of them, lots of money laundering that was tracked pointed to major governments and global businesses. Edit. Amazon Prime has a series called The Giant Beast that is the global economy. They talk about the Panama Papers in a couple episodes. Also Paradise Papers, the elite of this world money laundering and essentially hoarding wealth. I wonder why the media coverage was super slim HMMMMM. Oh come on, a lot has come from that. For example, the reporter that released them was assassinated in a car bombing. We are planning to cut all homeless people in half in 2025. The UK government. That's the best example of bad wording I have ever seen. Not declassified but leaked. Operation Yellowhammer, the government tried to say it was old but it had an August date on it. Dude. Mew English is nowhere good enough to comprehend the wiki article. Could you please summarize? Fun fact, Yellowhammer is an anagram of Orwell mayhem. And now you said it here. They're coming for you. Run. Let's see who's gonna be the soon to be disappeared redditor who names a currently classified top secret program. Can't remember the source, but apparently there is a legit order signed by Hilter to his nuclear researchers saying if they have a viable nuclear explosive start loading into V2s immediately. However, Germans didn't come that close to making a nuclear bomb. They didn't consider it a priority because they calculated that it wouldn't be a decisive weapon to win the war, especially against US who would already have nuclear bombs in their arsenal. Estimates put the probable year for a German nuke, if the efforts continued, around 1947. Good thing the Nazis were incapable of making a nuke, thanks Jewish physics. Boeing X-37B unmanned space shuttle. It just spent 720 days in space doing God knows what. Testing stuff. And maybe taking pictures like the one Trump tweeted of the Iranian space launch site. Edit. Apparently the USAF has disclosed that it's testing a heat pipe assembly, but I'm sure there's other stuff we're not allowed to know about. The MK Ultra mind control experiments. The CIA basically tested various means of mind suggestibility control through many front organizations. The main intent was to improve interrogation methods, but later expanded into other avenues of research such as making sleeper agents. Tests were performed both with and without knowledge or permission on large numbers of American and Canadian citizens. While some files have been declassified or leaked, the bulk of the files have either been destroyed or remain classified. As a result, larger statistics on the project such as death tolls, numbers of subjects and personnel involved and research gained can only be estimated as of today. I don't think it's classified, but Project Thor, using a satellite bomber to bomb a city. Imagine a missile or a bomb coming from space, and before you know it, your city is destroyed by a falling missile bomb. It was called Rods from God. Basically it would have used kinetic energy, no explosives. It would have used a series of 2,000 pounds tungsten rods to destroy and vaporize without the radiation of a nuclear bomb. It was only avoided because we signed treaties with the Russians not to weaponize space. Not really terrifying but fucked up. Operation Paperclip. Where after World War II the US government took Nazi scientists and shipped them to America to do science. Some of them came straight from Nuremberg cells. The most noteworthy being Werner von Braun. Von Braun built the V-2 rockets with Jewish slave labor. Every day they would execute the 5 slowest workers in front of the other workers to incentive them to work harder. Once he came to America, we shipped him to Huntsville, Alabama, where he built the Saturn V, the rocket used in the Apollo program, and got us to the moon. Right now there's a radioactive pile of trash in St. Louis and the surrounding rivers, which got infected with all the rain washing away the radioactive trash into the rivers, gave cancer to many people since the 1950s. Operation Northwoods. Not OP, but this is the opening paragraph from Wikipedia. Operation Northwoods was a proposed false flag operation against the Cuban government that originated within the US Department of Defense, DoD, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff, JCS, of the United States government in 1962. The proposals called for the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, or other US government operatives to commit acts of terrorism against American civilians and military targets, blaming them on the Cuban government, and using it to justify a war against Cuba. The possibilities detailed in the document included the possible assassination of Cuban emigres, sinking boats of Cuban refugees on the high seas, hijacking planes, blowing up a US ship, and orchestrating violent terrorism in US cities. The proposals were rejected by John F. Kennedy. How this is considered anything less than treasonous beyond me. Edit. People keep bringing up Operation Northwoods' likeness to the events that caused the Iraq War, namely 9/11. While it does prove suspicious, I guess we'll have to wait until the 9th of November 2026 to have a real answer. Edit 2. Editorial Boogaloo. It's the US official policy to release classified documents after 25 years. Although there are 9 specific circumstances that allow it to be pushed to 50 and even 75 years. Hence the 9th of November 2026. I remember something about a heart attack gun I read some time ago. Basically a poison gun that once shot is untraceable in the victim's body and leaves no mark on their body. SRY if it sounds RLY vague. Operation Mockingbird, Operation Northwoods, Operation Paperclip, the fact that we pardoned Unit 731. The list goes on and on. Damn America. You guys are fucked up. Came here hoping to find some secret MI7 activity in England, left here realizing I'm never visiting America. Don't worry, they will visit you. All of the birds died in 1986 due to Reagan killing them and replacing them with spies that are now watching us. The birds work for the bourgeoisie.